Don't use your imagination. Use your imagine heaven. Welcome to the show exposing the fraud of the government and religious narrative, bringing a new light of truth to the masses, and sure to make your congressman cringe. Welcome, family. Welcome to the show. I gotta say, man, I'm sure happy to be here today. We got a great show for you. We're gonna be talking about actually, Zoe, what are we going to be talking about today? I'll tell you what we're talking about today. Talking about how I disagree with John Dehlin and a bunch of the atheist shows out there about taxing religion. I don't agree with that, but I do actually agree that the L.D.S. corporation should be taxed. And so we're going to talk about that. You know, when I first heard John talk about, tax religions, or you should tax the churches, and I was hearing it at the same time on the Atheist Experience and other atheist shows and stuff, and I was like, no, not even the Mormon Church. And I don't agree with the doctrines of most churches, maybe most, well, not most especially, but certainly not with the L.D.S. corporation. But I was like, man, you gotta leave churches alone, because those people are giving their money to the churches in the hopes of doing good. And if you take part of that, and say, no, you can't use it for what you wanted to do it for, we're going to take it and give it to the government, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. However, there's a difference. And that difference is that the style of giving. So, I don't agree with the doctrines of and teachings of most churches, and in fact most religions. I like a little of each of them, but a good majority of the stuff in them is certainly could be left in history past, I guess. But religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all these, they give people a false, or misrepresenting, they're misrepresenting God and turning God into a God of animal and human sacrifice, little volcano replica altars, and, no volcano nearby to sacrifice somebody to. Just build a little volcano, just build one out of rocks and stuff, and set it on fire and throw some animals on top of it. And so, but that's the replacement in Christianity. So they have these little volcano replica altars that they sacrifice, animal sacrifice, and they call them burnt offerings. So I don't like that, because certainly, the way, the truth, and the life, not the way, the truth, and the death. And then human sacrifice with crucifixion and all that kind of stuff. He was crucified for the sins of the world. No, crucified because of the sins of the world. Saying that God would require death sacrifice. Death sacrifices are requirements of evil gods, okay? So, and then you have these really narcissist stories of, like, Abraham. God tests Abraham, although God, the Christian version of God is supposed to know the heart of every man, for some reason has to go ahead and test Abraham anyways, in a really narcissistic test of, will you kill your own son to show that you love me? And I've heard all the apologetics of it. Oh, well, Abraham knew that he wouldn't, ultimately require that and stuff like that. Doesn't matter. It's a narcissistic request in the first place. And to agree to do it is just as bad, if not worse. To go as far as putting your son on an altar and lifting up a knife in your hand, that is stupid. That is dumb. And even if you know that it's just the act of doing it and what it's the message that it sends to you, it's just disgusting, really. And it gives God a bad name that God does not deserve. So this narcissistic version, I think it gives people a bad idea of something to put their faith in. It mixes the Bible, um, the Quran, the Torah, all these things. They mix evil with good so that people, will accept bad things. And say, well, you can't judge the morality of God because God is the ultimate arbitrator of morality. No, duh. That's why you were given a conscience. That's why you were given a sense of right and wrong, so that you would be able to distinguish things that were of God and things that aren't. Sacrificing your son is not of God. You should be able to know that just from basics of what is good and what is evil. So, um, or what, yeah. Here's the thing. Most folks in these religions, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Mormonism, Hinduism, all of these different things, Catholicism, uh, they all do what I see most people doing. Not everybody, but most people will just glean the goodness out of it and try to hold on to that, and they pretend like or don't pay attention to the um, the evil aspects of their religious books or texts or teachings or doctrines. Um, and and as a congregation or a community or group, most people will tend to have kind of the same idea of the version of God that they believe in. In Mormonism, it's Heavenly Father, and He's like a loving, caring Father that requires some really crazy, weird stuff. Once part of kids' allowances and every day of your work, although people were warned. Now, I'll get to that in a minute. But anyways, so most people are trying to get the good stuff from their church and their religion, and that's the stuff that they hold on to, and they either don't pay any attention to it or put it aside or set it on the shelf or all these different things that people say. And so when they're giving to their church community for buildings and maintenance of the place and stuff like that, or for activities for their community, or for good of the greater community within which they live. And in most churches, pretty much every church except for maybe like Catholicism, but even local Catholicism gives a real good accounting to their members, from what I understand, of all of the money they take in and where it goes and that sort of thing. And I know small churches like little, First Baptist Church or, Church of Christ or something, and in your local neighborhoods and stuff like that. They give a very good accounting of. They know how much the clergy make. They know how much the administrative make. They know what the costs are for the building and for the electricity and for the lawn maintenance and everything. And the money that's left after, taking care of the buildings and stuff like that, they know exactly where it goes, whether it goes to a community project that they're doing to, a community garden or flower area, or feeding the homeless, or supporting the local mission. And I don't like missions. They're better than nothing, but it's a terrible thing they're just terrible, really. They should do much better than what they do. And I know that they mostly work with limited funds, but they could hit up the Mormon Church. They've got basically unlimited funds. So, but they don't like to spend that money. But anyway, um, and if there's something in these small little local churches, because that's what most churches are, just small little local churches. They might be part of, the Baptist Southern Convention or something like that, but they're just their small little church. They might donate a few dollars each month to the Southern Baptist Convention, but their money stays majority with their community, with their neighborhood, with their church, and they use it how they want to. And if they want to send it to build a well in Africa, then they do that. But they know where every penny of it goes. And if they don't like something, they can quickly get together, make the necessary changes. Or if the leader of the church or something is trying to say, no, they could just, we don't like that. So, but that's not the case with the Mormon Church. I should say the LDS Church. So let me say, I just want to say something really fast. First of all, I want to say that most of the members of the LDS Church Corporation that you meet are going to be kind, good, caring, loving people that are just doing their very best to raise the best families that they can and be productive as they can financially. It is a focus in the LDS Church, but they're just trying to do their best to live the best life they can, and they're trying to be pleasing to Heavenly Father. And so they had a big thing several years ago, big advertising thing where they were, I am a Mormon. And so you could see, they had all these advertisements and stuff on YouTube and TV and billboards and stuff. I am a Mormon. And people actually liked that because it was personal, because you would go online and people would be sharing their individual stories as members of the Mormon Church. And it was personal, and it was individual, and it was really, in a lot of instances, really sweet. But that's what it was. It was a marketing campaign. But people would say, I am a Mormon. Now I want you to hear what they were saying. I am a Mormon. What is amor? It's love, right? I am a Mormon. I am a person of love. I am a Mormon. And so, but their new leader, Russell M. Nelson, said, no, saying I am a Mormon is a win for Satan. We shouldn't say that. You should say you're a member of the Church of Jesus. Say that he wants them to identify with the corporate name of the church, because that's what it is. It's a corporation that is also a church, and that's always what it's been. Joseph Smith was always, trying to find some way to make you can't blame the guy, really, but always trying to find some way to, he was doing the treasure seeking and scryer and all these different things. What do they call it? I don't know, but treasure seeking and, staring at the rock in a hat and trying to find buried treasure and all that kind of stuff. In an economic system, don't blame the guy, And so, and what is one of the sayings they say? If you want to get rich, start a religion. And so that's what he did. And he was helped along by the government. That's a whole nother story. We'll do that with another show. I know there's going to be a lot of naysayers about that, but I think there's enough circumstantial evidence to prove it. And we'll talk about one of the links of that here in a minute. But so this new church, this new version of the church, the most recent version of the church, is really focused on this corporate image and all they call them missionaries, which is not a great name. Christianity really needs to get some discernment. Missionaries is a compound word. Mission certainly is one word. Aries is another. Ares is the god of war. Mission tends to be a military term. Mission Ares, and Ares being the god of war and mission being a military term, they certainly are a compound word. And so missionaries is serving an undertaking. A mission is an undertaking for the god of war. Well, that's appropriate because undertaking is an undertaker, right? And what happens during war? You get a lot of death. Work for the undertakers, right? So missionaries, I don't know how there could be such a actually there's not a lack of discernment. I can prove that too. They know what they're teaching people to say, and doing it on purpose. But anyways, another show. Okay, so so with the Mormon Church, the giving in the Mormon Church, or the LDS Church, I should say, the giving in the LDS Corporation is very different. It's not in most churches, you just give what you give. You give what you can, you give what you're comfortable. If you're feeling, extra, whatever, and you give a bunch, more than what you would, it's all that is up to you. Whatever you give is your decision. It's giving with, and the biblical term, giving with a cheerful heart, right? It's not required. And that's a good word, because in the Mormon Church, maybe it's not a good word, but in the Mormon, or in the LDS Church, I got to stop saying Mormon Church because it's the LDS Corporation is what it is. They own so many different corporations. The church is just one part of it. The majority of what the church has is corporations, just massive. The church is one mega corporation that owns a bunch of corporations. So, the giving is very different. It's required. Now, and it's required to give 10%. They require their active members that they give 10% if they want celestial exaltation, because in order to go to the celestial kingdom, you have to, which is the highest degree of heaven, because in their idea of heaven is divided into upper class, middle class, and lower class. So you have the celestial kingdom, the celestial kingdom, and the terrestrial kingdom. And most everybody goes to the terrestrial kingdom. Really good Mormons and like maybe like Mother Teresa, or somebody who spends their time just feeding the homeless all the time or something like that. Maybe they'll go to the celestial kingdom. The really good, the really good folks, the Mormons, this is their idea of it, will go to the celestial kingdom. And in the celestial kingdom, that's also divided into different levels. And the very highest one you can get to the celestial kingdom is, going to the temple in order to and get your endowments and be worthy. In order to be worthy to be able to go to the temple, you are required to pay 10% of all your income. All your gain. 10% of your gain you have to give to the church. It's a tax. They call it tithing, but it's a tax. If you want proof that it's a tax, I'll do that in a minute. But so it's a requirement. And it's funny because you have the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Requirement. And they're singing all the way to the bank. Now they say it's most probably the most wealthy religion in all the world. Maybe Sikhism has got more money, but as far as organized religions, it's the most wealthy religion. It's certainly the most wealthy corporate religion. It's one of few corporate religions like Scientology. So you have the three big corporate religions in the United States are the L.D.S. Corporation, the Church of Scientology, and Jehovah's Witnesses. All three of those are ones that have institutionalized shunning within their religions. Now, in Mormonism, they allude to shunning in their talks that they give during church. Mostly those kind of talks will happen in General Conference, which they have 2 times a year for all the members of the church. And Jehovah's Witnesses, they talk about it all the time, and in Scientology as well. They're pretty open about that kind of stuff. They call it disassociation in Scientology, disfellowship in, or it may be called the same thing in Mormonism and in the L.D.S. Corporation and Jehovah's Witnesses, disfellowship. Dismembership, excommunication. It's saying, hey, don't talk to those people because they have something that's not good for you. They have, they'll talk to you in ways that'll make you doubt your faith. Sad thing is, if you can't doubt your faith, something's wrong. Because if you can't question what it is that you believe, that means you're being controlled. This is simple, you know. So the thing is that's keeps the members paying. And so since it's a requirement in Mormon doctrine to be able to get to heaven, you know, and that's the thing, heaven shouldn't be divided like that, because heaven is one human family all together, right? No, what's divided into different levels is hell. What we experience here on earth, you know, is a version of hell, because it's our human family divided into upper class, middle class, and lower class. It's division, you know. So what the government is also good at, you know, DC, divide and conquer. You know, they started in the very beginning. They say a divided house can't stand. It's in the Bible, and the first thing they say is, we'll divide the country Republican and Democrat. So a country divided against itself. But so that's what their version of heaven is the human family divided into different levels, which is a shameful idea. But they don't think about it that way. All they're thinking about is the most righteous get to go to the celestial kingdom. And why would you want to be considered the most righteous? Why don't you just want to be considered a family? You know, what's wrong with that? You know, and everybody makes mistakes. And what we do is it's not revenge, retaliation, and retribution that we should be looking for. It doesn't fix anything. That only satisfies a lust. If when you have somebody that you don't think is as righteous as you or something, then we work together. But first, you better be sure that you're really not in position to be the judge of that. But in any ways, in a family, if somebody is, you know, I don't know. I really hate to try and come up with... I'm not going to try and come up with an example of that. What I'm going to say is, you shouldn't want to be righteous, more righteous than somebody else. You shouldn't hope for that, right? You should hope that everybody is together, right? And stop saying, you know, let's have a system where if somebody falls short, we leave them behind. Because that's not cool. That's not family. That's certainly not family. Not a good family. So, anyways, to get to that highest degree, they're required to pay that money. And that is the difference. That's corporate giving. That's required giving. That's, in one way, it's a financial servitude. It's a bond servant. And so when you're doing that to people, you should be required to pay taxes. The L.D.S. Corporation should be required to pay taxes on every dime that it gets. And it shouldn't be teaching kids that their Heavenly Father wants part of their allowance for doing their chores on time or whatever, you know. Um, teach kids the gift of living instead of the cost of living. How about you do that? Because that will make God happy. I can promise you that makes God. No, let me say that. I can assure you that that makes God happy if you teach the gift of living instead of the cost of living. So, and that's what the human family should be doing anyways, right? We've made all these financial systems, political systems, religious systems, judicial systems, all these different systems. We could just make heaven together. Everybody lives here together, so why don't we just make heaven together? It'd be a lot more fun than the struggle of financial, worries of bills and, the human family is much better than the human race. In the human race, you have winners and losers because it's a competition, because it's a human race, right? People trying to get ahead of each other, trying to stay ahead of the competitions, trying to stay ahead of the bills. And so when you have that kind of thing, you have winners and losers. But if we did it as heaven, as the human family, everybody wins, no losers, right? That's the thing. Who in your family do you want to lose? Okay, hopefully none. Hopefully none. So the giving in the LDS corporation is very different. It's required, and there is no accounting given to the members of the church or because it's a corporation, and there's no specific accounting giving to the world of what they're doing when they're buying up all these corporations with the members' money. So yeah, very, very different. And the reality is the LDS corporation, what people call the Mormon Church, or what people say is the Mormon Church, is just the American answer to the Roman Catholic Church, because the LDS corporation it's the Roman Mormon Church instead of the Roman Catholic Church. Look, just look at the church administrative building. Now, most churches, like most of your Baptist churches and all that kind of stuff, their building style, if you look at the front, will be that triangle shape, and then some pillars, because it's Roman architecture. They don't realize it, but they're part of the Roman death cult. And that's why they build Roman buildings. The Romans were the one that crucified Christ in the biblical narrative, and so they should really not be building buildings that look like Roman buildings, but that's exactly what they do because they're being deceived, and that's another story. That's another show. So you have the church administrative building for the LDS corporation. That building is a Roman building. You got the Roman pillars, all the Roman architecture, okay? And in the front, you can't get any more Roman building than that building right there. It's just like the government buildings in D.C. Again, D.C. for death cult, because that's what the Romans were. And those fire cauldrons there in front of the Mormon Church administrative building, those fire cauldrons are crucifiers, because that's what the Romans were. They were crucifiers, right? And so that church is demanding 10% for a Roman building. And what that is, they call it tithing, but it's a Roman tax. And if they're going to be taxing their folks, then they should be taxed by the government. Now, I don't think anybody owes the government anything, but if it's going to be, they're all going to be part of this Roman, thing going on, then they should just subject each other to whatever it is that they desire. And we know that there's nothing that the Roman cult loves more than money. Money and death. They love those two things. Everything they do is based on death. And if you look at the LDS religion and the government and actually all religions, all religions, all Abrahamic religions, they're all based on death. Most of their doctrines are based around death. And but there's really a focus on it in the LDS Church and with the government. Bureau of Engraving. What's a grave? It's a place for dead people, and that's where money comes from, and money is engraven, and those are engraven images, graven images, the images of people in graves on the money, and that's why money is, if you take the tail off the Y and then read it backwards, it's venom. And that's why there's a payment system called Venmo, because it's an anagram of money, which is an anagram of venom. And those three words all fit together. So, and like Patreon. Well, who was on the tree? Adam and Eve. Who was on the tree? Patreon. That was the serpent. And what does the serpent have in his fangs? Venom. It's money. But the little green men that took over the earth is what they are, huh? Right? And the little money, and the army men, with their helmets, right? Helmets. They met hell, going into, soldiers and Christian soldiers and all that kind of soldier. Sold what? Sold your soul. Soldier. Soul die are. Again, another show. So, since it's required, and since it's a tax, and since it's a tax of a corporation that is incorporated in and underneath the state corporation and the corporation of the United States, since it's a subsidiary, then they should be subject to tax of the government. After all, it is a for-profit corporation. They changed the spelling of profit to PH, but that's what religions did a long time ago. False prophets, right? That PH is the false sound, the false F sound, false F sound. So that's why they falsify the documents. When they got in trouble with the SEC, because they were falsifying documents. And so that PH in the middle of prophets, the PH don't make an F sound. P makes a sound of p, p, and H makes h. So PH is a false F. And so that false PROPHETS is false prophets. So it's false prophets. And they falsified documents to falsify prophets of their false prophets. They sing that song, follow the prophet, follow. Well, what's that song? What's it really saying? What are they? So they use the magic spell, to change the letters ph. They use a magic spell, PROPHETS, but what they're saying is PROFITS. And that's what happens when it's a struggle for profits. FITS, fights, right? They have a fit. They're having a fit over the money. They're warned about this. So people were warned about that in the Bible. Now the Bible is no holy grail of truth, but it does have some true things in there. And one of the things that it did do is warn people that if they choose people as rulers over them, and in the Mormon church they call them authorities, which is a false god, the false god Thor with the brain manipulation power, authority, like the House of Representatives, right? THOR, Thor, is a bunch of serpents, right? Because it's the legislative branch. They're people that pick up a pen and they start trying to control and rule the lives of other people instead of it being the quality of love, equality. Right? They've abolished that in a favor of authority and subordinate, serving a false god. And that false god is a servant of the serpent, the serpent on a tree. Why? Because paper is made from a tree, right? And so if you're writing down rules to try and control other people's lives, you're being a serpent, because you're abolishing the equality of a family equality, love equality, right? And instead instituting authority and subordinate, which is doing that. Just like the Mormon church in their degrees of heaven. Yeah, and then you look at Russell M. Nelson, the prophet of the church, the guy that's is a matter of fact, the L.D.S. corporation is a sole corporation. Now that means to some people, only one person has control of the corporation. So when in the L.D.S. corporation, when there's a new president, and that's what they call him as a president, they don't call him a prophet as much as they call him the president of the church, because it's a corporation. President is a corporate title, just like the United States is a business. President's the corporate title. So it is with the L.D.S. corporation, and so when he takes office as president, he becomes the sole owner of all the assets of the church. The guy instantly becomes a multi hundreds of billions of dollar billionaire. And they don't tell the members of the church that their general authorities get paid six-figure incomes and have all kinds of extra benefits on top of that. They don't explain any of that kind of stuff. They just tell the world and their congregation that they have volunteer clergy, but all their church administration, first presidency, and all that kind of stuff, the general authorities, they all get paid. Wealthy people. But and it's not taxable because they say it's a stipend, or they're being reimbursed, which is the same thing as an income. Oh, go out and buy your kid a gift, and then we'll reimburse you. That's just the same thing as you made some money going to buy the gift, So you don't lose anything, but now you have a gift, And so, and their stipend, they consider it, like a living allowance. It's not income, they say. It's how the government and corporations work to make sure that the wealthy stay wealthy without actually spending their money. Same thing with the LDS corporation. So, but sole corporation is also another word. Soul. A sole corporation. They use the word spirit a lot in, that's why they use the term missionaries, because spirit is a magic spell. Spirit, a spear, spiritual war. They call it spiritual war, and that's a magic spell for spirit, you all war, right? And so they have their pictures of their, stripling young warriors all carrying a bunch of spears and swords and stuff, because they're in a spiritual warfare. But war isn't fair, but apparently they feel like, that's what they say all the time. The words of your mouths, what they say, what comes out of your mouth is what's evil, so think about those kind of things. Even now, I talk sometimes and say some of these magic spells without even thinking about it, because it's the language that they're taught, that we're taught. But those spells are intentionally put in the language so that it affects your subconscious, so that it affects your actions, and makes you think some of your thoughts are your own when they're not. But Russell Nelson, sometimes they refer to him as RMN. No vowels in there. But if you add two vowels, the reverse vowels of the alpha and the omega, and just reverse it, do the opposite, and put the O and then the A, you get Roman, which fits that Roman building, and also fits his last name, which is Nelson. And if you think that might be a magic spell, then change it to what it sounds like, which would be Nelson, N-A-I-L, son, because the Romans nail son to a cross. What son? The Son of God. And then they go to church and pretend on Sundays with every other Christian religion out there to pretend to eat the Savior instead of save the Savior. Eat in remembrance of his body, and then they eat some bread, and then, so that's, you're eating and thinking about his body, or so that they're eating his body, and then drink in remembrance of the bloodshed, of his blood. And so you're drinking, and that's why it was started out with, it was initiated with Jesus Barabbas. Jesus Barabbas. That's Jesus. That wasn't Jesus of Nazareth. That was Jesus Barabbas who did that. He said some disgusting things in the Bible that get attributed to Jesus of Nazareth. So yeah, it's a Roman church, and it's a Roman corporation collecting Roman taxes from its flock of congregants. And flock, you, and you. You should really think about those words, okay? So you have you, which is you, or you. Then you have you, which is a sheep, which would be part of the flock. Are you part of the fold? Are you part of the flock? And then you have you, which is a plant, like a tree, a bush tree plant thing. And what family of plant is it? Taxus. Tax us. Taxes. Right? So have you paid your taxes? Are you paying your 10% to be a part of the fold? What fold? The blind fold. Because you can't see. And what do blind people need? They need a cane. Because you have the mark of Cain. Anyways. So they require that money. They require it. And they're singing all the way to the bank. So since they're a Roman corporation, they should do it. And then they say their God is one. It's said often in the... and so what do you have in the first presidency? And how do they when they do a picture of the first presidency, they put them in this order. Oakes is the first counselor, then the president. Actually, for you, I guess it would be like Oakes is the first counselor, then the president. That's Nelson, and then Henry B. Eyring. So that's Oakes, Nelson, and Eyring. O-N-E. Our God is one, right? And then Eyring, right? So you have the IRS of the Mormon Church collecting their 10% taxes, right? The cost of living instead of the gift of living. And that's the part that makes me the most mad. So, we got anything else to talk about? I think that's about it. It's truth just hidden in plain sight. So, I did all this kind of sensational thing in the start and doing it like this, a talk show and stuff, but I just want to talk to you for a minute. So I'm going to set this down. And I'm going to just talk to you like I want to talk to you, because if I started the video any other way, YouTube wouldn't promote it. Plus, people are just addicted to sensationalism, and so they want a podcast and production value and all this kind of stuff. But I just want to talk to you as a human family. Members of the Mormon Church are good, kind, loving, caring people. Most of them. And their goal is to do good and to do good in the world. Now, they've been taught to kind of shun the world and focus on their corporation. That is not... it's their fault, but it's not their fault, because there's a lot of neural language programming that is used to help manipulate people. These religions like Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses and L.D.S. Corporation, they're all very high control. They are very focused on money and the production and growth and all this kind of stuff, and not nearly as much focused on love. But the members get manipulated with words in such a way that they feel like they're doing a really good thing. And when they have a good experience, they think because they have a good experience, because God doesn't deny them a good experience, that it's because they're righteous. And when they see other good experiences in the world, they say, well, it's just, it just happens sometimes for them, but they're not truly happy. They're not as happy as us, and all that kind of stuff. That's what they're taught. And so they don't know the difference. But here's the thing I want everybody to think about together. It's the human family. We don't need all of these kind of divisions, whether it's religion or government or financial, political, or any of this stuff. We don't need any of that. We're a human family. We have the opportunity and the ability to make heaven right here together. There's every kind of topography around the world. Mountains and beaches and countrysides and, just almost any kind of thing you can imagine. And instead of making each other pay and making it the cost of living, we could make it the gift of living. And if we do that, people will be able to do the work that they love to do, and they will love to do it because it's what they love to do. And you don't have to talk people into doing that. You don't have to worry about, I used to, maybe you've had a kind of work where you couldn't wait to get to work, right? Because you had something planned to do that day and you wanted to get it done and wanted to see the end result of it and all that kind of stuff. And we all have that kind of passion, but most of us don't get the opportunity to find what that is because we got to take some job to be able to pay the bills. And so all that kind of stuff a financial system has limited our human family from making heaven. There's certain people that don't want that, okay? But that's because they've gotten so used to having so much, they're scared of losing, and they don't see how much better it would be as heaven instead of this financial struggle that we've created. My message in all of this is for the members, because I talked a lot about the Mormon Church in this, and for the members of that, the L.D.S. Corporation, if you're a Mormon, I love you so much, and I appreciate what you're trying to do, in the sense that you're wanting to be good. I would ask you to just stop, and instead of taking the advice, just listen to your own heart. What sounds right to you? Does it sound right to you that Heavenly Father wants part of the money that you have to struggle to earn in most cases, and many times, to try and survive in this financial system? Does it make sense to you that He wants that? Now, there is some nuance to that I don't know if you're ready to accept, but I'm not going to go into that. I just want you to think about just the morality of the idea in the context of LDS doctrine. Does it make sense that you would use the word missionaries or temple dedication? Listen to the words of your mouth. Dedication. Dead. Temple is another word for body, and you're enunciating it. The enunciation of the words of your mouth is you're enunciating it dead. Let's go to a temple dedication. And they also now will say sometimes that a temple is also the representation of Christ's body. So they're enunciating Christ's body dead. And the word endowment is a word that means a financial payment. And patron, which is what visitors who attend ceremonies at the temple, they're called temple patrons. And patron is someone who pays money to a business for some sort of purpose. And so it's about finances. That ceremonies are an endowment ceremony, which is a money payment ceremony, and the people that are attending it are called patrons, the people that pay money. It's the house of the Lord. It's being money changers in the temple, right? And they call it the house of the Lord. Why? What's the difference between a house and a home? A home is where you're welcome with no money. A house you got to pay. That's why they call it the House of Representatives, because they're there to pass a bill that everybody is supposed to pay, right? Now you're going to pay for this bill. We're going to pass the bill. We're passing it right to you, and you pay it. That's why they're passing a bill. These words have meanings, and they think. You got to think about the things that you say, and if you would think about some of the things that Christianity teaches about God, you got to learn, or you got to be able to see that it's just not true. It's just not. But I love you, and I know that you're doing your best, and I'm thankful for you. Okay? Y'all have a great day. I love you. We're family, the human family. Let's make heaven.